All right, cool. Let's do this. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Sports Gaming Anonymous podcast. This is episode number 10, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not good at math, but 1, 2, yeah, okay. Well, anyway, I am Flash, aka Flash Extreme, aka Re, aka whatever. With me today, the squad, Dre Wingate, the best producer in the business. What's up?
What up? How's it going?
Man. And my man C1, your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. What up?
What's going on?
Man.
For some reason in the background, I always got something weird going on. So today, I got the wife making deviled eggs over the other side of the camera. So I'm like, this is cool. This is like watching. This is like I'm on the podcast, but then I got the cooking show right in front of me. I'm watching.
Did you say making deviled eggs and it's 11:45 at night?
I was just getting ready to say that. Like,
our crib runs 24/7. You never know what could be going on.
Clearly.
Yeah, bro. I got little ones playing Sonic the Hedgehog. I got
Sonic
one,
is trash.
I got one dancing. Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa.
Okay. So Sonic as a property is not trash. Okay. Sonic is dope. We just watched the movie the other day, and the movie was dope. I can see why they greenlit a sequel already.
So you telling me the movie's not trash?
No, the property is not trash. Sonic as a character is great. Just the games are trash.
But the game is trash.
Oh yeah,
even
absolutely.
Though everything else came from it.
Oh yeah, no. It's trash. It's trash. It's trash. And
what makes it?
It's too fast. And because there's too many things that the level design. I will say that's irrelevant.
It's working correctly.
I will say the level design in Sonic games are excellent. They're vibrant. They're colorful. I like. You can access different levels of the environment. It's up, it's down. There's like a lower level where there's more enemies. And that's dope. I can respect that. But something about the gameplay just doesn't sit well with me. It's just too fast. Like I was playing Sonic, I think Sonic Mania, which got high rave reviews, which was on a free play weekend or whatever, like a couple months ago, and I played it. I'm like, this is just not fun to me. I'm like, it's just like too much. Like he's going around the loops and he flips up in the air, off the spring, rings all over the place. I don't have the same like gusto. And I can even think back in the day, having Sonic
was fun back in the day. It's there. It was fun back in the day.
Sonic was always like you go to somebody's house, like we go over to Mark's house and playing Sonic, and it's like you watching somebody, it's my turn, you playing, and you're like, for me, I'm like, I'm not feeling this. I'm just like, all right, what else can we play? Throw on Shadow Blasters, because more fun. Throw Golden Axe back on. Like,
Sonic. What Sonic did for platforming, and then multiplayer co-op platforms, and then
Sonic and Tails. He's referencing when Tails got in the picture in Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
And then to be able to start adding in other playable characters. This is before a lot of franchises were doing this.
Now, hang on. Now, Mario was doing this as well. So
he's right.
I agree with you that Sonic is a good game, but don't act like Sonic was the pioneer.
Mario wasn't doing co-op.
Okay, you know what? Again, Dre did bring up a good point, but C has a good counterpoint, because even though the original Mario Brothers was 2 players, it wasn't co-op 2 players. You had to take turns. So the first player would go and die, and the second player could play as Luigi.
Right, and what they did specifically, and I like that this is what's unique about what they did with Sonic when they introduced Tails, was the second player, which was typically the little brother, when you playing games, could die as many times as he wanted to die.
He just kept coming back.
And he just kept coming back on screen.
There was no lives for Tails. He just kept coming back.
As an older sibling, you could play the game as much as you want, and your little brother could do whatever they want. And
flying around and shit, just not doing anything. I don't even know what Tails' purpose was in that game.
Flying off screen and be completely useless the whole game, but you can put them together.
Yeah.
and
Be the
no other
occasional
game was
distraction.
good.
That's about it.
Knuckles, and then Sonic 3 when they had the
Listen.
add-on, and then you could put Knuckles into Sonic 2. And I think
Dude.
that was dope. That was dope. The premise of how these games, Sega, again, we've had this discussion before. Sega was always ahead of their time. Always.
So I don't understand what you mean by too fast.
It's just too much happening in comparison. And you know me, for full disclosure, if nobody that doesn't know already, if you haven't been paying attention to this and the Flash and Dash podcast, shout out to my man Dash. As again, being the elder statesman of the group, not by a lot. See, don't do that.
You got me by a lot.
You're only a few months behind me. Don't do this.
Hashtag free dev.
At 37, again, being one of the few elder statesmen in the group, you know,
free dev till it's backwards.
Yeah, free dev. We'll make sure we get that into every podcast now. At this
every podcast till he shows up.
Damn, I totally lost my train of thought. Goddamn Sonic.
I appreciate that. That was my
Sonic.
You were basically explaining why the game was fast paced or too fast.
We're just going to negate that point because the game is amazing. Sonic has been excellent from day one. I don't know about the next gen once it started going 3D and all of that. Like I don't co-sign none of that. But the original,
I remember my point.
You know, Sonic through Sonic and Knuckles, those were epic games.
Yeah, and the point I was making was being again, like I said, for whoever has been following along, I'm a Nintendo head. I'm a Nintendo fanboy. I finally come to the conclusion and the realization that even though I'm a core Microsoft gamer from that standpoint of things, I am a Nintendo guy. I've owned at some point literally every Nintendo console except Virtual Boy because nobody needed to own that.
Virtual Boy
trash. I've owned every iteration of the Game Boy. I've owned NES through Switch at some point in time. But in those days, I was Sega. I fucked with Sega, and Sega was, again, we've mentioned this before, Sega, the Genesis, and I think me and C had mentioned this on the Old School Gamers podcast. Go check that out. We had mentioned, that Sega, in comparison to the Super Nintendo, Sega really put the screws to them. It was very much like how back in those days, it's so funny how in those days, games and wrestling were so like intertwined and went through the same trials, because while Sega and Nintendo were going through console wars, WCW and WWF were going through wrestling wars, and WCW was winning, and for a while Sega was winning. But again, we know how both of those stories end. But Genesis was, in comparison to Super Nintendo, was more colorful, it was more vibrant. If Nintendo didn't have those RPGs, we might be having a different conversation now. Again, they had those Mario games, but you had Super Mario World, and then Super Mario RPG was hot, and then after that, it was just there wasn't much else Mario-wise aside. The original Mario Kart was great. It was revolutionary, but it wasn't the best version of Mario Kart. It's arguably the worst version of Mario Kart. If you go back and play, trust me, if you go back and play the original Mario Kart, it doesn't hold up well.
You hear this guy?
It doesn't hold up well at all.
You need to switch dealers back to whoever you had before, bro.
It doesn't hold up, especially once you.
The original Mario Kart is the best Mario Kart.
You are on crack.
A lot of people like Mario Kart 64.
No.
I think they slowed the game down too much by the time it got to Mario Kart 64.
Trust me. I'm sure it's been a while since you've played Super Mario Kart and Super NES.
Super Mario Kart?
Promise you, I played it recently. It does not hold up well. It does not hold up well. For a number of reasons. It's the grandfather. It is the grandfather of, Mario Kart games.
It's like the hot, sexy grandpa.
No, it's not. It's the old, decrepit grandpa.
It's the grandpa that chicks be posting pictures of, like, oh shit.
Yo, speaking of, since I mentioned the grandfather of things, and I know the answer to this, and I want to see who else comes up with the right answer. If Doom is the grandfather of first-person shooters, who's the father of first-person shooters? Because nobody ever mentions that. We always, you always go super OG and the grandfather of this, the grandfather of that, right? So again, Doom is the grandfather of, that's the original OG for FPS, hands down. There's no argument, because without Doom, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today. But if Doom is the grandfather, who's the father of FPS, first-person shooters?
I think we can unanimously say that it's GoldenEye.
Wrong. Next. Who else?
Because y'all.
And I'll tell you why you're wrong, and I'll tell you what the answer is.
Boy, he was
once
quick
I hear
with
what
that.
Dre says.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a good.
I got a little kind of argument, but go ahead.
It's a good mention, but.
Tell me what Dre got to say.
I'm too young, so whatever I suggest is not gonna be right. Like, I'm just gonna tell you that.
Yeah,
okay.
Man. I'm just curious what you think.
Me too.
My introduction to first-person shooter is GoldenEye. So to me, that would be the father, and the son would be Call of Duty.
Okay, you're both wrong. Okay.
So wait a minute.
So
no matter
I'll
so
say
no matter
this.
what you're about to say about the father,
Call of Duty being the son is right.
Oh, okay.
Call of Duty is the son. You're right. I'll give you that.
I don't want to start. I don't want to hear nothing that was on PC primarily.
Fine, that's not a problem. I won't even. And even though that's Doom. Even though that's Doom, but again, there were no. That was the only games at the time, so Doom is by default.
I'm getting on a plane and I'm flying to wherever you at right now.
Doom is by default the grandfather, but you're right. Call of Duty is the son. The father is Halo
for $48 right now. So I mean, hey.
And I'll tell you why it's Halo and not GoldenEye. GoldenEye was great for what it did, but Halo revolutionized what first-person shooters were and made room for Call of Duty to do what it did.
No.
Yes, it did.
Because what got people into Halo was the popularity of GoldenEye.
No.
I don't know if I agree with that
Halo
statement.
was Microsoft's
it's GoldenEye,
bank account.
but it's next gen and it's in space. This shit is cool.
Yeah,
that's what Halo was.
And no, what
but
really
I don't
got
feel
people
like if you
into Halo,
didn't play GoldenEye, that doesn't mean you weren't gonna play Halo. Like GoldenEye wasn't necessarily like the gateway.
You didn't play GoldenEye and then played Halo. Though.
GoldenEye,
but there are people that played Halo that never played GoldenEye. Is what I'm saying.
GoldenEye, right? Halo got people involved in a way that again revolutionized first-person shooters, because of the twin stick. Not GoldenEye didn't have twin stick. Halo put twin stick first-person shooters into a different, and again, the design of the Xbox controller also pushed that narrative, which helped.
This is the whole thing is that it was there with the PC games that were already out.
Well, PC games didn't have controllers. They weren't using controllers on PC in those days.
No. I'm not talking about the controller itself, but I'm just talking about the way you can change angles and just having that dual access combo.
Yeah, but that was always a thing for PCs.
Because Doom, you weren't like looking up and looking all around. It was just side to side. And then you go to like Quake and Wolfenstein.
Yeah. Those again. Those also fall into the category of Godfather status, because those games are old as dirt too. The Quake and Wolfenstein are right up there with Doom, so those games are old as dirt too. But again,
that's what I'm saying. That's why I put GoldenEye in that spot, because as far as like the look around and then it was again, really the multiplayer factor.
And I'll also tell you, and I'll also make that call again, not just because I'm a Microsoft fanboy, because again, I'm a Nintendo fanboy first and foremost, but I was never huge into GoldenEye like that. But GoldenEye doesn't hold up the same way. If you go back and try to play GoldenEye now, you will hate it. I promise you, because once
the campaign you hate, it's the multiplayer that was popular about GoldenEye.
Well, yeah,
so.
But we didn't know any better. We didn't have a different control scheme to compare it to, because now that after Microsoft and Halo came along and completely changed the narrative, there's no going back now. So when you go back and play a game like GoldenEye on an N64 controller, you're like, man, this is rough. But because Halo set that tone, Halo changed the tone, and it had the environment and had the world and it had just that whole scope of things, but not just that. Again, it was a control scheme. It paved the way for what Call of Duty did. Even though there were shooters on the PS2 before that, nobody was checking for them like that. It wasn't until Halo came along and Microsoft changed the control scheme, and it was after that Call of Duty had their boom. It was after Microsoft came through. It wasn't until Call of Duty 3 that Call of Duty really got their boom, and that was with that next gen. Once we got to PS3 and once we got to Xbox 360, and then Call of Duty 3 became big. It was a launch title for 360, and it really was like, yo, this is great. And then Call of Duty 4 came out, and then it was wrap for that. That was it. That was that was the end. That was the beginning of where we're at now, shooter wise. Because Call of Duty took the baton from Halo and ran with it. In a relay race, I will give GoldenEye its credit that they took the baton.
The second leg.
Yes, I will give them their second leg credit. I will give them their second leg credit. Yes, I will do that because because they did bridge the gap between those Godfather games, Doom, and again Quake, Wolfenstein, and between
that
Halo.
Third leg and that anchor.
Hey, the Halo and Call of Duty. And again, Halo got us.
I think
Halo
disrespectful as hell.
Halo got us to where we are now. Let's not front. Let's not pretend like it didn't, because who knows if we had left everything up to Sony, we have no idea where we'd be right now with shooters. We just don't. No, you can't definitively say that Call of Duty would have gotten to where they are in this perspective, in this aspect, without Halo. Just because
Call of Duty doesn't really exist without Halo.
Not in the fashion that it does now, because it did exist as a property, but it was very like,
it was cool.
It was just all World War stuff.
You could say that Battlefield wouldn't have existed.
True. I mean, in fairness, I think Battlefield was on the scene. Like Battlefield 1942 had its place also, but again, that was a PC title.
They were just shooters. Shooters were just shooters back then.
Right. Shooters were just shooters.
There was never a shooter back then that was the game until GoldenEye.
Until Halo. But no, in those days, yes. GoldenEye stepped up to that plate first.
You didn't have GoldenEye. People were like, "What are you doing?"
GoldenEye stepped up to that place first. And again, that's also another point to the Nintendo 64 in general, because the Nintendo 64 in general was known for multiplayer. It was a console that was.
It was based around like party games and multiplayer.
It was based around its multiplayer aspect. GoldenEye, Mario Kart, Mario Party, all the wrestling games. Nintendo, the N64 made its claim to fame on a multiplayer, and then from there, which was after that was what, GameCube. You know what's funny about the GameCube that a lot of people don't realize until they really sit down and think about it? The GameCube was when Nintendo took all their properties and made them weird.
The GameCube was trash.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. The GameCube was not trash.
The GameCube was super trash.
The GameCube is a very underrated console.
It was novel. I can call it that, but I won't call
this. Don't do this. I will send the Nintendo
Here's the thing
community
about
to
the
your door.
GameCube. The GameCube has a cult
I'm not even
following.
going to fight. Maybe 3 classic GameCube games, bro.
You want Metroid Prime? First of all.
Wait, but isn't classic GameCube games just classic Nintendo games? Like, that's not necessarily a classic for the system, but the general
Metroid
consensus.
Prime was also on the Wii. So I'm not counting that because
right. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's a classic
Prime's
Nintendo
excellent.
thing. But what I'm saying is, like, the GameCube. Generally, a lot of people say that it wasn't the best system for Nintendo. Really, you could say it was probably the worst Nintendo system until the Wii U came out. But
Nintendo had a few years that just trying shit.
There's that small cult following that loves the GameCube. That's the thing about it.
Those controllers were so whack.
The GameCube controllers hold up well.
Big.
And this is why, and that's why that's the definitive controller for what people use for Smash Brothers tournaments now. That is the controller that people use for Smash Brothers tournaments, in pro tournaments.
I mean, it's a party game.
Well, I I'm not gonna debate you on that because that's my point. I made that point because Smash Brothers is not a fighting game; it's a party game, and I hate the rhetoric that it's a fighting game. It's not a fighting game.
I'm pretty sure that was brought up during the Flash and Dash episode.
Smash Brothers.
I'm not a fan of the memory card system with the blocks that they had on there.
Yeah, but that was what everybody was doing.
The standard at the
time.
But
Sony was doing that. The only people who weren't doing that was Microsoft, and that's because Microsoft was ahead of the game. Microsoft was like, okay, we see what you're doing. We see what you're doing. Here's a system with no memory card and a hard drive because we see people complaining about it. Everybody's like, oh, that was just something for Microsoft's first mistake. Microsoft has made mistakes throughout the years with their consoles, and we know
a lot.
This. The Xbox One was probably their biggest launch blunder. They totally foobarred the Xbox, and they never recovered from that because the PlayStation 4, I will admit that from a whole school library perspective and what they did in general, Sony picked up from their mistake from the PS3 era, which is the generation they lost to Microsoft because they charged way too much for the PS3 out the gate. It's like $600-$700, and it was like nobody's buying that. But the Xbox,
I think they're about to do that again.
But the Xbox 360 was like what, 400 something, and people were like, oh, well, I'm just gonna get a 360. I'm just gonna get a 360.
Well, for the 360, I think it was 450, but if you got the 500 gig hard drive. Yeah, I think it was like 500 or something like that. But they gave you those options.
It was still way cheaper than what Sony was doing.
Oh, most definitely.
But Microsoft, again, one of the mistakes they made along the line was with the Xbox One, their launch was horrendous. First of all, they marketed the system they tried to market this, which is what I call it, the Xbox One, this all-in-one. We're the center of your whole thing, and you can plug the cable into you can stream your DVR through this. Nobody does that shit. And you can do this and you can do that, and here's the Connect. You might do it, but
I don't do it with cable, but what I do is I have antenna hooked up to my Xbox.
Okay.
And I've got the cable adapter, so basically I use it so that I can watch local sports. And when the Falcons are playing, I can just throw it on Channel 5, and then I got DVR built into the Xbox.
Why would you waste your Sundays watching them lose?
Whoops.
That's a whole nother conversation, because I did watch them beat the Eagles this season, so that was really nice.
But did you not watch the Eagles beat them in the regular season? Then the following year, they beat them in the regular season again. Then the following year, they beat them in the playoffs.
I'm talking about the season that just happened.
And then did you all
the season that just happened?
Did you all go to the playoffs? Where were you all watching the wild card?
Where was your quarterback in the playoffs? Let's ask about that.
He was on the field. Where was your quarterback during the playoffs?
His whole body was on the field.
Where was your quarterback during the playoffs?
Answer, he was on the field. Getting hurt again.
I see you ain't answering my question though.
Just saying. Anyway.
Yeah, so like I was saying.
There are not 3 classic GameCube games.
Yes, there is. It's Metroid Prime, Mario Sunshine, Eternal Darkness, Smash Brothers. Just
all games that moved to the Wii. So the Wii is the classic console.
I just told you they're all classic Nintendo games. There aren't classic Nintendo. There aren't classic Nintendo games outside of like GoldenEye, because that's just straight for the.
Yeah, but you could make that argument for every. You could make that argument for every console.
Well, that's the thing. But like when you state like
Nintendo has the. Here's the thing. Let's be honest. Nintendo has the most impeccable track record, just as long as and in terms of their first party games, their track record is like, okay, if they decide to make a game, it's going to be flawless. Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, shit. Even Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze was fantastic. Mario Kart 8.
What was that Luigi game?
Luigi's Mansion, fantastic. Luigi Mansion 3, forget it. Like, and their track record for doing that is much higher than everybody else's. Their games are consistently better than what Sony and Microsoft does from a first party perspective. Because even Halo over the years has misstepped, right? once they got
But
past
you want to know
4,
why
or
that
really
could
once we
be a
got
thing?
past Reach.
I really think it's because Nintendo doesn't get what's the word I want to say? They don't necessarily get grimy with their games. They don't get,
Yeah,
like
It's a
hardcore
toy.
like that. You know.
It's a toy.
because they don't have.
So
That's
so
not
it's
their
easier. It's easier,
MO.
and I'm not saying. I mean, granted, the Nintendo, they satisfy both kids
Designing
and
kids game.
adults. But that's
Don't
the
do
thing.
that.
As
It's
long as
not
they,
necessarily a
they
kids
get
game.
the kids' attention, like they're good. Sony and Microsoft,
Yeah, but
they don't necessarily. They can't necessarily focus on the kids because they're not kid centered. Like they're
No.
teenagers and up,
I
so they
understand that.
gotta
But
make
just
sure they
because
got
you're
that
focusing,
hardcore content, and that's kind of hard
and
to always do all the time.
well, and at the same time, on that same vein, just because you're designing a game with a certain audience in mind doesn't mean that the game. Because here's the thing, they're not designing the game specifically for kids. Yeah, they might make it where their games are accessible to kids,
It's kid
but
friendly.
that's not their primary focus, because they need to make sure that the adults playing these games are getting enjoyment out of it also. So just because you have a certain focus doesn't mean the game is easier to get. Breath of the Wild is a masterpiece game. It's a 10 out of game. It's a damn near perfect game. It's arguably one of the best games now ever. But it's not designed at kids. It's not targeted towards kids. Like Zelda is not easy. It's not easy to navigate in that fashion.
The Zelda and the Metroid franchises are definitely
Especially
meant for
Metroid.
older audiences.
Yeah,
However, in general, the console is designed as a family-friendly console
of
that
course.
kids of all ages can
Now,
play those games.
it may be designed as a family-friendly console, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have non-family-friendly games, because I have a few of them, so I know.
It's not like
But
Link is chopping heads off. You know what I'm saying?
no, of
Like,
course not. But that's their main properties, and obviously you can't do that. It's not something Nintendo does. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean just because they have a specific focus that it's easy to make a 10 out of 10 game, and they
no,
do that.
not at all. But what it is when you can hyper focus on, on a specific genre, or maybe 2 or 3 specific genres, and the first party games have done extremely well. Like, I mean, you don't, you can't speak positively enough about the success of Nintendo's first party games, but they are designed for specific audiences. And I played through Metroid when I was 4 or 5 years old, and I watched my son play through Metroid Prime when he was, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. And so these games, even though they're designed to be marketed towards a little bit of an older audience, like Breath of the Wild, for example, at that same time that we have that nostalgia, children can play through these games.
Yes, they can. I will say that. I won't debate that at all. But also, I will say, in the same vein as that, some of the games we talk about, Nintendo, Microsoft and Sony, those games can be navigated by children. Whether or not they should play it is a different story altogether. But they can be.
I want to see my 11-year-old playing Dark Stranding or whatever that game is.
Stranding. Nobody wants to play that game. That was another overhyped game that was decent at best. But
or like Last of Us, or one of these games, these games are designed for gaming.
Correct. They are designed that way, but that doesn't mean they can't be navigated by children. Like, I'm sure kids could play it, but again, the content, they shouldn't be playing it. But as far as the structure of the game, they can navigate this stuff, Yeah, but that was Microsoft. That was one of Microsoft's missteps. They've made missteps with these consoles, and their missteps with Xbox One was the marketing and the Kinect. Putting the Kinect in it was like, oh, you had to get the Kinect, and then they didn't stick to their guns, which is another big mistake that they made. Because it was like, if you're gonna have this thing, don't backpedal so fast. I understood that they felt like they had to, because they were like, people were complaining about it. They're like, oh, okay, you can buy it without it. It was like they were too quick to do that, which means that they didn't believe fully in that shit in the first place.
Correct.
That was the problem that they made with the Xbox One launch, which is why they lost so much ground to Sony with the PS4 out the gate. So that was a problem, because they should have just dumped that Kinect, and it could have been way cheaper than the PS4 out the gate. we know what the problems with the 360 were. Structurally, the 360 was an excellent console, just had too much problems in the beginning with. And you know what's funny is that just because people don't remember, the PS3 had the same problems.
Yeah, it had the red dot.
But people forget about that because it didn't have a fun little cliche name stuck to it.
The red
right,
rings
exactly.
Of death.
But trust me when I tell you, the PS3 had just as many problems as the Xbox 360, and they lost that generation. Just for the record, so we're clear, Microsoft completely won that generation.
That was literally my only complaint about the console was the red ring.
The red ring, that was it. And once they fixed that towards like the middle end of that generation, 360 was blowing PlayStation 3 out of the water. And the original Xbox One is fun. The original Xbox, I should say, the first mistake they made, and really to me was kind of like the only mistake because they pretty much had good correctional throughout the lifespan of the original Xbox. You remember you had to get to play DVDs in the original Xbox, you had to buy the remote kit with the little thing that plugged into the controller port. And that was the only way DVDs would work in the original Xbox. That was Microsoft's first design mistake.
I think that was only at launch. I think later on there's an update to where like the controller.
I think so. I don't remember, but
I know at launch
that
like,
was
you had to
definitely
have that
a thing.
Kit.
You had to have that.
That's pretty trash if that's what they did.
Yeah, in the beginning there was no way around that. You had to buy that thing to plug into the Xbox. But let's. I just wanted to touch on the fact that there's a reason why Microsoft is still in the game, right? And the original Xbox came in at a time where Sony was dominating the market space. Yep. And literally to this day, the PS2 is the greatest selling console of all time. It is now, I think it eventually passed the DS line, which is incredible because think about how many iterations the DS had and how many, households had multiple kids that all had a DS. The DS as a whole scale was the greatest selling console, and then PS2 eventually passed it. But it's like, which is bananas for just a singular console to do. But think about the PS2 had already had its footing, and then Microsoft was like, yo, we're dropping a console. For all intents and purposes, there's no way Microsoft should have been able to get out of the gate. Like, there's no way that Microsoft should have been able to even get out of that generation alive because Sony was dominating it.
Microsoft was supposed to be what's happening in the Stadia right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what Microsoft should have happened to Microsoft, right? But aside from having the money, because Microsoft is a software company, they could have killed the Xbox in that generation and they wouldn't have they wouldn't have been able, they wouldn't have blinked an eye like, whatever, who cares? But Microsoft, because of what they were doing contextually with the console, again, I mentioned the hard disk drive before, having the hard drive in there was a huge thing. And then Halo. Halo was what kept Microsoft in the game, I will say. Halo was the most important game in Microsoft's literally in the Xbox's franchise history to this very day. The original Halo is the most important game to the console because that's why I got an Xbox was Halo and Dead or Alive 3. I saw those two games on the in-store display at the Electronics Boutique and I was like, yes, give me an Xbox because I need those games. Like, and they got out the gate and they just kept rolling and they've been able to compete. Like I said, the 360 won that generation. It was like, yo, and Xbox Live. Xbox Live is the other reason why they were able to hold a footing because they were ahead of Sony in that department because Sony was still like, hey, you can do 56K dial-up or you can get this broadband. And Microsoft was like, nah, chill. You got to have broadband to play on our joint because we're not doing that 56K garbage. And then everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, we could mess with that. And then Sony was still doing 56K. And then it was trash because no matter what connection you had, all people were playing together. So you could be somebody with broadband playing with somebody that had 56K, and that was
Lag
trash. And for the younger audience, 56K is that original dial-up telephone access to the internet. So you can imagine how slow that was and trying to play video games over that connection with somebody who had a broadband speed connection. Trash. And that's what Sony was offering
the
up.
whole game drop out.
And that's because in that part of the world, in Japan, they didn't know nothing about that. Even to this day, Sony and Nintendo are still like fumbling over themselves to do online properly, especially Nintendo. But because they just don't care about that.
Innovate the process, and it's like it's already successful on another console. Just copy the model,
right? So it's like,
and they keep trying to do this thing with the custom, the characters or whatever, the emotes, not the emotes.
You know what's crazy? If Sega had made it through all of this, they would have been ahead of those two consoles in online, because Sega with the Dreamcast was way ahead of everybody else to even attempt to make it work.
Yeah.
They were way ahead of everybody else. So they were focused on trying to make it happen. So it was like, and they would have made it happen. They were a company in Japan that was like, okay, let's try this online thing. Like this is something that people were doing. They looked at the Western world, was like, yo, PC gamers are playing games online, and that's a thing.
I would pay money to see what made Sega, exactly what made Sega say, "What, we're just gonna drop out of the console game," because
it wasn't their fault. It was because at that time you had 4 consoles. You had PS2, you had GameCube, you had Dreamcast, and you had Xbox. Somebody had to go. Somebody had to go.
One had to go.
The landscape of games can't support 4 home consoles. Even now.
Lived harmoniously.
Yeah, like exactly. It's exactly that. We've talked about this before. It's literally
Fire.
Airbender.
Air.
Like this is Avatar shit. Literally.
Yes.
Like, and it's like somebody had to go. And it wasn't like Sega had to go because they were trash. And I think me and you had talked about this, or I'd mentioned it on the last podcast. I don't remember. So it's either on the last podcast or it's on the Old School Gamers podcast. But
or it might be on Flash and Dash.
Or no, it wasn't Flash and Dash, because this was, I think, recently. But okay. I feel like Sega with the Dream, well, not I feel like, but what happened with the Dreamcast was Sega had fucked up too much previously before the Dreamcast. First of all, because with the original Genesis, they were like, oh, here's a 32X, and here's a Sega CD. And it was like, buy this add-on. And granted, it was ahead of its time, and I see what they're trying to do, but I think this is the Old School Gamers podcast. I mentioned this. They needed something in between. They needed a console in between that. They should have just bit the bullet and be like, yo, here's a 32-bit console.
Yep.
Here's what we're trying to do. Here's a separate console.
They got ahead of N64 and all of that.
Exactly. And
instead, by the time if you bought all those extra pieces and all that, your game looked like a Call of Duty gun.
Exactly.
By the time you was done, all the little extra parts and attachments, they try to add on to that sucker.
Right. So when Sega came with the Sega Saturn, not only was it really expensive and kind of obscure, so many people were turned off by all them add-ons that the Sega Genesis had. And then not to mention the fact that the Sega Saturn didn't have a whole laundry excellent lineup. That it was kind of like people were like, I'm not really, PlayStation is out. So let me get PlayStation. It's better. The graphics are better, whatever case may be, right? So by the time we got to the Dreamcast, everybody was like, I don't really trust Sega like that. And the Dreamcast, I've mentioned before, Dreamcast is without a shadow of a doubt the most underrated console to ever exist in gaming.
They innovated so much between the emus and the damn
the graphics were so clean on those games.
Oh my God, playing Power Stone on that
Power Stone, the original 2K games, NFL, NBA, 2K2 for both of those systems.
Crazy
they dropped all this
Crazy Taxi, Sonic Adventure. Even I'll admit that Sonic game was fire. Like all of those games, like they had the Marvel versus Capcom was on there. Capcom versus SNK was on there. Like, yo, the Dreamcast.
They dropped so many like high quality titles in such a short span of time.
The Dreamcast had bangers, but the three biggest reasons the Dreamcast again failed was not Sega's fault on a whole scale. Was one, they had already messed up twice before that, and people didn't trust them anymore. And so two, they were the fourth console in a 4-console war, and somebody had to go. And three, which is probably undoubtedly the biggest reason, was they had no protection on their games. Piracy was an issue for the Dreamcast, the biggest issue, because all you had to do was burn a CD, not a DVD, not a DVD-R, not a DVD-RW. You could burn a Dreamcast game onto a CDR and play it in the console without having to do anything. You don't have to rip. You didn't have to
mod in there.
You didn't have to
back in the day and all of that.
You didn't have to put in a special. You didn't have to mod your system. You didn't have to put a special add-on in the back. All you needed was a boot disc and a CDR for whatever game it is. Put the boot disc in. It was like, all right, bring it to the screen, open, join up, put the disc in, close it, on.
Let me ask y'all this, because one of the old school classics, one of my original favorite, Atari, is actually dropping a new console at the end of this year. VCS. I don't know if you guys read about this yet.
I have.
Okay, so some of the specs. They're using a Ryzen processor in there. They're promising 4K gaming, and then also it doubles as a gaming PC for $399.
There's no room for that.
There's no y'all sold on it.
No room for that, and not only is there no room for that, because you got Sony, you got Microsoft, you got Nintendo. This is nobody can.
I'm thinking of this, right? Because a guy like myself, like, who wants to get back in the PC gaming, but I don't want to fully commit to the build of a gaming PC.
But just get an NVIDIA. You get the NVIDIA. What is it? It's the NVIDIA joint that you can get. And you can play your Steam games on there.
Because that's what this console is offering.
Yeah, there's already a space for that. You got NVIDIA. NVIDIA has a whole gaming thing that they do with Steam. There's already a space for that. Like,
so let me ask y'all both.
Google Stadia has tried to jump in and they failed miserably.
Y'all like, ooh, let me go ahead and spend that little $400. What could they?
What's your question?
What could Atari do that you would just be scrolling on social media, you see an ad and you see that is what they're doing, that you would be like immediately now interested in going ahead and purchasing?
The price would have to be $99.99.
Yeah. Right now, MSRP is $399. They're offering a pre-order bundle for $389. I think.
Listen to what I'm saying. $99.99.
And not only is there no space for that just because the big three exist, there's no space for that because 2 out of the big three are giving you a new console this year, right? So, and
that are pretty much PCs themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And especially Microsoft, because Microsoft is giving you Game Pass on this
12 teraflops,
whatever device, whatever your Sony ain't got 12. Whatever device you want, Microsoft is giving you xCloud, except for Apple devices. But and again, that's not Microsoft's fault. And I mentioned this before, it's Apple's fault. 100% Apple's fault. This is documented. But there's no space for that. And it's Atari. What do you like? Atari is not. They don't have any IPs.
It's not the type of brand. It's not the type of brand to even.
Space
like they'll get the retro people back, but it's not the type of brand where the young guys are gonna be
I'm a retro player.
None of the young people are gonna be like, oh, I gotta get an Atari over a PlayStation or Xbox. Like, no, it's gonna be Xbox or PlayStation. And that's it.
You're not even getting the retro player because again, Atari doesn't have IPs like that because Atari was great for what it was. Atari is the grandfather of console gaming, right? But uh, that doesn't mean it was any
Use that word
good.
again.
It's kind of trash. Like Space
Just
Invaders was
let
cool.
Atari stay in the arcade. Just let it stay there and
Because all those classic first party titles, like you said, Space Invaders.
When I see
Dig
like
Dug on the
you
computer. I don't need an Atari for that.
when you see when I
new version of these games.
when I walk through the store like a Target or Walmart or something, and I see like and I walk through the electronics section, I see like the classic Atari like game thing. I'm like, I'm not even looking.
A new console that is working with different
so all right,
developers.
let me answer your question. Let me actually answer your question with a final answer. There is nothing Atari can do or promote or put on a commercial or put on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. There is nothing Atari can do to make me go out and spend money on their system.
They've got no footing here. They've got no footing here because
primarily because there's just no interest.
There is absolutely no interest. You saw I went to sleep when you brought it up.
Even for me, there's no interest. And I'll tell you why. And I'll expand on the reason why. Because there's a foot everywhere. Sony has IPs for you for individual epic single player adventures. Nintendo has the mobile market on lock and family games on lock. Microsoft has
multiplayer,
cloud gaming, Game Pass streaming services on lock. You can go to NVIDIA and get your Steam PC games on the go, wherever. They've got that on lock.
How much is that, by the way?
I'm not sure. It ain't $400. I don't think. But everybody's got a foot, and Stadia is just here, just waiting to die. But it's because it's trash. Stadia has no footing because it's like Stadia tried to fit in between what Microsoft is about to do and what NVIDIA is already doing. And people were like, yeah, but you're charging for service and then I have to buy the game separately?
That's what I thought was weird. Like, I'm like, okay, if you're going to charge me a monthly fee, cool. It's like Game Pass.
That's like Game Pass and then having to buy the games anyway? No. What? I don't.
Paying a monthly fee and buying games? What's wrong with you? Are you on crack?
Yo,
like,
go ahead and beat it. Miss me with that. And then you have to buy the thing. Like you don't. I mean,
and the control. You got to buy a special controller, even though it's just a Bluetooth controller.
Microsoft. When Google was doing all this, Microsoft was laughing. Like, this is funny. Here's what we're gonna do. You got an Xbox controller? Cool. Here, buy Game Pass and then play it on your phone or your laptop or your tablet or your computer or your Xbox. Done. And Stadia was like, shit.
They missed that one.
But once you have Game Pass, you don't have to also buy those games. Damn it. We've got a problem. Yes, you've got a big problem.
I don't understand trying to get into a space like, the video game industry and, trying to enter with a new platform and not being a step ahead on that. That was just foolish.
Right. That was dumb. That's why I'm also confused at what Amazon's trying to do.
But see, I think that sometimes I think sometimes consumers or we as the people on the outside, we give those people that are sitting in on those production meetings a little too much credit. Like we think that they're sitting in there and they're thinking of all the best things in the world when really as soon as someone comes up with one good idea, they're running with it. Like they're not necessarily sitting there and waiting for every single great idea to come through. They're like, oh, that sounds great. Let's do it. And then after it comes out, they do their whole press release, everything. And all of us were like, well, why did they do that? Why didn't they just make the system this price and they give me all these games and I'm paying the subscription fee? And they're like, oh, snap. Why don't we think of that? Like they don't think of that stuff until it's brought up. I mean, it happens in everyday life with everything. Like, there are people that have to, for Halo, for example, Microsoft is coming out saying that Halo is going to be delayed till 2021 due to, unforeseen obstacles. But I bet you it's being delayed.
Some of it's COVID.
I mean, I'm pretty sure some of it might be COVID, but I'm pretty sure also that most of it is because after Microsoft's, release of all the gameplay and everything after their showcase, a lot of people were talking about what's up with these graphics though. Like, why does this look so flat?
Here's the thing.
Like,
And again, the nitpicking is kind of like, it's there, and I can understand it. And as I've said before, and I've said this 1,000 times, I'm not as concerned about graphics as I am about gameplay. Because, and I think I've mentioned this, again, old school gamers is another plug for that. And I've mentioned this before, where games started to get worse quality-wise once developers started to care about graphics more.
You mentioned down Flashy Dash podcast also.
Facts. So once generations started to come along and we evolved from 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit era, they were just like, oh, these new hardware, PlayStation, Dreamcast, PS2, Xbox. Oh man, we could do all this stuff with hardware. We make these games look great. And then games that looked great were like 4 out of 10 because the gameplay was trash. So it's like gameplay is way more important than graphics. Because you could look back at old games. Me and C played Streets of Rage 4, and you look at games like Streets of Rage 2, games like old school back in the game, Gunstar Heroes, all these games, all these Mario games on Super Nintendo, even a crap ton of NES games that were really good, because a lot of them were really bad, but a lot of them were really good too. But it's not about graphics. Those games hold up today because the gameplay is fantastic. Like
more fun.
Exactly. Good game.
Now games just piss you off.
Right. Good gameplay is 100 times out of 100 always more important and more and much better than good graphics. Like, if you tell me a game looked like trash, respectively speaking, obviously, but the gameplay was amazing, I'm going to play that game. And again, not to placate into my Nintendo fanboyism, but
there's a reason why there's a rise in the releases of all these retro style games.
Right.
Because
and you look at what
developers, especially small developers, indie developers, are starting to understand. Right. Okay, these types of games, there's still a market for this because people liked the level of difficulty. People like the challenge of it.
Right.
People like that if you actually put the time in, you were going to progress. And, people like those things. No right. Microtransactions and such. If I pay $60 for a game, I get a full game. I don't get a quarter of the game.
Part of the game.
Trying to charge me for everything else down the line. Like,
right. It's like Nintendo. You look at what they do. You look at games like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey. Do they look nice? Are they colorful? Yes. Are they pushing the boundaries of graphical excellence? No, absolutely not. Are they 10 out of 10 games? Yes, they are, because the gameplay is fantastic. And that's all that really matters. And again, those properties are excellent at what they do. But Sony and Microsoft, again, has a history of not doing that because they're like graphics. And again, obviously you got your hitters. You got games like Last of Us. You got games like, Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, all those kind of first party A1, Sony titles, Uncharted. They can do both. Yes, the games look great, but it's the gameplay. It's the gameplay that takes those games up to a 10. You look at games like, and coming back to Halo was never a game that was graphically pushing the boundaries. Halo looked nice. Yeah, of course. It always looked good. But it wasn't like, oh, it's a graphical masterpiece. No, it was a gameplay masterpiece. It revolutionized what shooting games were. It sucked you into the environment. It was about the character. It was about the story. It was about Master Chief. It was about the distinctive elements of, what you could do, how the enemies were so varied. You had grunts, you had jackals, you had elites, you had the hunters, you had all these different enemies that scaled up in difficulty. You had vehicles, you had all these things, but it was never about, oh, this is a graphical masterpiece. It was like, yo, this gameplay is fantastic. Like,
so that's what sucked people in with Gears too.
Yeah, again,
Gears just an excellent experience all around.
Excellent. Does Gears look good? Sure. Is it a graphical masterpiece? No. But nobody cared.
Well.
you're here for the story. You're here for the characters. Marcus Phoenix, Dominic, all those characters. It was a gripping story. Those first 3 games, like it was like, yo, that's what it was. And you look at, again, you and me being those old school gamers. Final Fantasy ever an excellent? No,
Fantasy's never excellent.
Nobody's here for graphics. Final
However,
Fantasy,
what they did when they went to the original PlayStation. Those games on the which was about 7, 8, 9, I believe. No, not 10. 10 was on PS2, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So 7, 8, 9 on
7. Mind you, let's keep in mind that Final Fantasy 7 was a system seller for PlayStation. Final Fantasy 7 is what put PlayStation on the map because a lot of people bought a PlayStation for Final Fantasy 7. Yeah. And the only reason, because up until that point, Final Fantasies had historically been a Nintendo thing. They were on Nintendo, and the only reason Nintendo didn't get Final Fantasy VII, and I learned this recently, was because of cartridges. Because Final Fantasy VII was too big to go on a cartridge. Yeah. So because the Super Nintendo went from N64 and they kept cartridges, because they chose not to go to CDs, and PlayStation did, Final Fantasy VII ended up on PlayStation and not on Nintendo 64. Yeah. Now, can you imagine if they had went to discs and Final Fantasy VII had ended up on whatever that Nintendo console would have been called?
Well, the thing is,
as opposed to PlayStation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is,
won that generation.
As far as like the gameplay was excellent. The graphics were terrible, but the graphics on the cutscenes were excellent.
Oh, yeah. The Final Fantasy VII remake was how they wanted the graphics to look like. Those cutscenes is how they wanted the whole game to look, but they just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's funny. A lot of people will make the statement, and I haven't gone back, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and a lot of old school retro stuff, and a lot of people are making the case that Final Fantasy IX is better than 7 as a structural game, right? And I haven't. It's been a long time since I played through 9. I remember 9 being excellent, right?
9 was excellent,
but I haven't gone back and played it in a while, so I don't have the memory scape to really speak on it. So until I do, I will reserve judgment. Until then, I'm just going to keep saying
9's on Game Pass.
And so is 7.
Is it?
Yeah, 7 just went on Game Pass Live just recently within the last few days. So shout out to that. So keep that in mind. So go download Final Fantasy 7 on Game Pass and 9 and play both, because apparently 9 was deeper and just like more involved, because apparently what a lot of people say is that Final Fantasy 9 gameplay wise kind of went back to the roots of Final Fantasy a little bit, where 7 went kind of in a different direction, which is fine by me, because again, 7 was dope and the whole system and Materia and everything they did, but they say gameplay wise 9 kind of went back to the roots of Final Fantasy a little bit. So again, as an adult now, I kind of want to go back and refresh my memory on 9, and I will do that. But Final Fantasy, that is there what it is. Apple is trash.
You want to talk about it finally?
Here's the thing. I've mentioned this before. I've been making peace with Apple people, because even though Android is the highest, marketed selling provider of cell phones in the world, as the platform, because it's not just tied to one, maker. Android is on Samsung, LG, Hawaii, or however you pronounce it. Sony, like all these companies make phones that use the Android platform, whereas iOS is singularly only an Apple platform. So naturally, on a whole scale, it's not gonna. But that's a different whatever. Apple is. First of all, shout out to Epic Games. Because Epic Games has finally, they are the company has stepped up to challenge Apple and their App Store shenanigans. And I say that because I'm sure there's no way to avoid the information now at all that Apple, because of their policies and because of them blocking specific applications from doing certain things on their App Store, because so Fortnite is now off the App Store, right? It's off the Google Play Store as well, right? But I'll get into that in a minute, that part of it. Mainly because of what Fortnite did where Epic put something, they put like this event out that was like, oh, come over here and buy the content directly, whatever the case may be, and that violated some Apple policy terms in their App Store or some bullshit, whatever. So they pulled the game from the App Store. And again, in the same vein where Google doesn't allow that either, they pulled it as well. But again, I'll get into Google in a second. But the bigger picture with Apple is because Apple blocks games from doing this stuff specifically, right? So they blocked xCloud and what they've been trying to do. Microsoft's really been pushing for it, but Apple was like, because of their policies, it's not a thing. Google Stadia is not on Apple, and it's not on their app thing because, again, same policies. And those policies they're written in a very specific way, where it's because they can't moderate the games that are accessible from the service. They're like, oh, we don't allow that, but because we can't monitor what those games are, we can't rate them or whatever the case may be. Mind you, how's that any different from Netflix? But whatever. But again, and this is why game developers and game companies are coming down on Apple, because it's like, yo, how is that any different from any of the other services that are very similar that are on your App Store, but that are not policed the same way? So why are you punishing game companies and game developers when you don't punish other companies like Netflix who do the same thing? Okay. How many thousands of movies are on Netflix that they can't moderate or, whatever. So I'm like, okay. So Epic put that out there, and Epic knew that Fortnite was going to get pulled. So they had the lawsuit drawn up already. So it was like, as soon as it happened, it was like, bam, they filed the lawsuit immediately. Right. And to quickly jump back to Google, nobody's coming down on Google and the Play Store because Google allows third-party installation. So even Google's statement was like, yeah, we have to pull it because of our policies, but you can go to any third-party app store application and download it because we allow third-party installation. So they literally put that information out there because they're like, we allow third-party installation, so go download it from them directly. We have to pull it from the Play Store, but you can go get it anyway. So it's like, so Google's like, do what you want anyway, because that's what the Android platform, that's how it functions. It allows third-party installation. It allows user interface, kind of do what you want to do. So game developers don't have beef with Google and what the Play Store does. Because both Play Store and Apple, what they do is they take a 30% cut of transactions from all that, and Epic was like, no, that's too much. Like, you're trying to monopolize what you're doing on your platform, and it's a whole thing that's going to continue for some time now. But I will say, shout out to Epic Games, but at the same time, I will caution to say that obviously they have their motives, right? This isn't like, while it is consumer friendly, and I shout out to them for standing up and having that voice and knowing that because they have such a footing and because Fortnite is such a huge thing in the world, that they can do this and garner the attention. And it kind of paves the way for other developers and other companies to maybe get their stuff back on there, or at least restructure the deal. So maybe the Apple's not taking a big of a cut or whatever the case may be. But obviously it's a business, right? So you have to understand that in this same vein, yes, they're standing up for this, and yes, they're putting themselves out there, but at the same time, it's like, hey, look at us. Look at Epic Games. Look at
I mean,
Fortnite. Look
Apple's
at what we're
been
doing.
the monster for a long time,
Yeah,
man.
it's like, look at what we're doing. Come download Fortnite again, because you have to know. You have to like understand that even Epic was looking at Fortnite and was like, yo, why are we losing? Like, why are we not as popular as we were before? Because you had to eventually realize that Fortnite was going to lose some steam. You look at what Apex Legends came on the scene. You look at
Call
new
of Duty.
game. You look
Warzone.
at you look at Warzone. How much revenue
Warzone,
that picked up.
my
You
opinion,
look
is
at
murdering Fortnite
right.
now.
You look at the new games in the landscape right now. You look at games like yeah,
PUBG
you
just
look
dropped a new season.
right. You look at whatchamacallit, what's the why does the name of the game escape me? The PC Revenant or
About Rogue Company.
no, not that one. The other
Rogue Company's good too.
yeah, Roll. And then Hyperscape just dropped on consoles, and that was a PC thing that's now live on consoles. All of these things is now taken away from Fortnite, and Fortnite has seen a downtick in popularity recently. So obviously, this is you have to understand that this is possibly a marketing thing, but at the same time, shout out to them, because this might lead to xCloud getting on the App Store, maybe Stadia getting on there. Not that anybody cares about Stadia. Shout out to the 5 people that are on Stadia. But, this is a thing. This is a thing right now. And you have to say shout out to Epic Games, but just keep it in perspective. Keep it in perspective that they're doing what they're doing for them. They need the publicity. They need people to come back and play Fortnite. But at the same time, they can afford to stand up and say, yeah, we knew you were going to take our game off the App Store, but we don't care. And so at the same time, shout out to them. And Apple's trash.
I can respect
because
that. Especially the Apple's trash part.
Like, I just like, it doesn't have to be this way. It just doesn't. Like, I can't imagine that this was the vision, because what's crazy is that when Apple is doing exactly what they fought against when they went up against IBM 30 years ago. This is exactly what Apple, Macintosh, this is what they fought for when IBM was trying to monopolize the market.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
You know what?
Yep,
100% fact. That's 100% fact.
I think what Apple is doing is they're losing sight of the fact that they were a hardware-focused company originally.
Yeah.
And that's what Apple's reputation was for. We have the best
hardware. Okay, I'm gonna stop you there, because for any good company to continuously to grow and to survive, unless you have a product that can sustain like that, you have to grow. You have to move into different markets. I mean, look at Microsoft. Microsoft was all about chips,
software,
and then they move into, now granted, video games is still just an extension of a type of a software, but they moved into a whole nother realm. Moved
into hardware with the Xbox.
Well, Microsoft kind of stepped in, and when Microsoft stepped into computing, they were focused on, okay, we're gonna have the most user-friendly experience.
And it's not like, and no matter what people think about, no matter what your preference is, either PC or Mac, and we can recall the OPC Mac commercials with Apple. But the biggest thing is, even though Apple has moved into other realms, their main product has not faltered. Like, there's still people are still buying Macs, MacBooks, iPhones, and they're still good products, are still quality products. So it'd be one thing if they're moving to the stuff and their main product was faltering. It's just it's all decision based. Like, it's what it's what their board of trustees is basically deciding what to do. And people aren't just agreeing with that, because Apple, I think they're $1 trillion company now. So everyone's basically getting to the point where they're like, you have enough money. You don't need to take so much from us, because we're trying to grow. Don't worry, we're not going to outgrow you, because we still need you, but we don't need you to take as much of a cut, so we can continue to grow and hopefully continue this partnership. Like, that's what it all kind of boils down to. Like, Apple
kind of failed in the department of when they started moving into trying to figure out how they're going to grow this phone originally,
Right.
you know, and then of course, you know, Steve Jobs passed unfortunately early in the process.
I would think that was when Apple started to shift gears in a negative direction.
Yeah, in my opinion, before, and my opinion is that basically when Steve Jobs died, Tim Cook went ahead and took a lot of that R&D budget and poured it into marketing and just got focused on, okay, how can we make more money and how can we sell more?
Right.
And whereas Steve Jobs' focus was how can we make the best product?
Right. Steve Jobs was really about innovation and products and how do we, you know, had Steve Jobs still been alive, Apple would be a complete, well, maybe not completely, but what we know product line for Apple now, I feel like would be different to what it is like now and what they push now.
The iPhone right now if Steve Jobs is alive, and this is going to be my hot take tonight, is if Steve Jobs is alive, the iPhone would be the gold standard for phones, and it's right now
worldwide.
There is no gold standard right now. Like
no,
nobody's done the perfect phone at the perfect price point.
And
like nobody has that right now.
And again,
this is what Steve Jobs would have in place right now.
Yeah, and as many people that buy Apple, again, like they're not the biggest phone, you know, like distribution, you know, company like in the world. Like, again, that still belongs to, you know, I'm pretty sure that's the whatever Android platform or whoever. But again,
looking it up.
And Apple's yearly revenue, again, the last time it looks like it's been reported was the fiscal year for 2018. It was $265 billion.
The phones sell well, and then they sell all their software through the Apple Store.
Yeah,
they do everything that on the iPhone passes through.
In terms of the phone, Samsung's number one with 20% of the market.
Yeah, for the world, that's the world, right?
Yeah, the Chinese tech company, Huawei.
Yep.
There's
Huawei.
16.
Samsung, yes, Samsung just passed them.
They're 16% of the market, and then Apple is 13% of the market.
Yeah, because Apple is only hits here in America.
It hits in China.
Yes, it does. But as far as everywhere else, like those other companies, like I said, Samsung, Huawei, like those other companies are so much bigger on a world scale than Apple is, and again, that's because Apple's an American company, but probably because in China, because don't they outsource to there now? So that's why.
Well, also a lot of the world for a while was, you know, Nokia for a while was still the top selling company in the world
for a while,
up until very, very recently. And so a lot of the world's, primarily, you know, Africa and Europe, you know, were very, very focused on not the nations within those continents themselves, but, you know, a lot of people that lived in those areas were buying Nokia phones because of brand recognition, and then B, of course, durability. You know, even now, you know, if you go back and look at, you know, Nokia phones, you know, those phones from, you know, just that's a primary example, Flash, from when we were younger, the 5,000 and 6,000 series, like you can still find a lot of those phones and you can hit the power button, they still turn on. Like those phones
snake any day.
Whereas you take one of these iPhones or one of these Android phones now, you know, you get a year and some change. You know, I got an old iPhone 3GS I found in the crib the other day. You can't even open the App Store basically because everything's done.
You can't do
everything's been phased out. Yeah. You can't do nothing. You can make phone calls on it and text, and that's pretty much it.
But application-wise, you can't do nothing on those phones.
You can't do nothing on those phones. And so, you know, the old model of the way mobile phones used to operate, you know, that's just now really in the last, when I say now, I want to say the last, you know, 2-3 years is just now starting to get phased out. Whereas, you know, a lot of the world is starting to get their hands on some smartphones. And, you know, the reason Huawei has created such a large footprint on the world is because they've cornered the market on budget phones.
Oh yeah.
So that when you want a smartphone, but you can't afford a $1,000 iPhone, can't afford a $1,000 Samsung phone, there's a nice $99 Huawei phone that you can get, and it's not the best phone in the world, but it does the things that you want it to do. You can scroll on Instagram, Facebook. You can check your emails. You can make phone calls, and it takes decent pictures. So
on a reliable platform because it's going to run Android, and that's what it's going to run, and that's it's going to run. It's going to run good. It's going to run good for the time that you need it to, and then whatever.
Typically, people that are switching companies, or I don't want to get into the into people's pockets specifically, but a lot of times when people end up on budget phones, they go, oh well, let me just get this phone temporarily until I can afford the phone that I want. Because typically you get these phones on, what's become more commonplace is doing prepaid plans on these companies, because
or like that loan type plan.
Contract is basically no longer necessary.
No,
like it's an antiquated thing ever now to be on a 2-year contract for a cell phone.
You just pay monthly. You just pay monthly for your phone.
You pay a flat bill. So a lot of people, they get the $99 phone, they stash some money to the side, and they come back around and they might, go on like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace on one of these things, and they go and they buy that. They might go spend $300, $400, $500.
Right, and that's and to quickly switch back to gaming. That's what Microsoft is going to end up doing, because, again, I mentioned it in the past. That total access thing exists. They've tested. They've tried it out for a while, and a lot of people are on it. Where you get your console, your Game Pass, Xbox Live, all of that rolled together in one monthly cost, and you just roll out with that, basically like people do with their cell phones. Like the last generation, the Xbox Series S, I mean, not Series S, but shout out to that possibly being announced, but the Xbox One S, like you could get that plus Game Pass Ultimate, which obviously includes Xbox Live Gold, for $20 a month.
What I kind of want to know at this point
why would
is,
you not do that?
For the viewers, please drop in the comments what you have, like as far as like if there's a correlation, because I've always been curious about this between the mobile phone and the game console. Mm-hmm. I've always kind of associated Apple with PlayStation, and I've personally, associated Android with Microsoft. But I don't know if people.
This is that same conversation. I've had this conversation. Me and Dash have had this conversation several times now, right? And I always told him that there's a consumer that is always 2 out of 3, right?
Okay.
And that 3 being because my brother is a consummate, he's Apple, Nike, Sony, right? He's got all 3. And a lot of people, if you're 2 out of those 3, like you're one of those people. Like a lot of people,
I figure that's the more common path for people.
Lot of people are in those 2 out of 3 range.
Yeah, I'm Apple and Nike.
Exactly, Apple and Nike, Apple and Sony. A lot of people are in that 2 out of 3. Those 3 things go together somehow. I'm none of those 3. So if you're not 2 out, you're none of them. If you're not in that ecosystem, you're not in any of them. Like,
now I feel like a hipster.
Hey, that's okay, bro. That's all right. We're in the PC, Microsoft, Android ecosystem. Like, and those things absolutely generally go together. And for me, having a PlayStation is only as a secondary, well, really as a third console type of thing for me. Like, because me, it's Microsoft and Nintendo. So sometimes a PlayStation fits in every now and again, but I don't do Apple, and I've softened up on Nike recently. I have a couple pairs of Nikes, and I understand the appeal.
Everybody's got a pair, but I'm talking about like your primary.
But no, it's not my primary, and I'm not enveloped in the ecosystem. All I'm enjoying them shits be pretty. I ain't gonna lie. Nike is the one company that makes men's sneakers
get that out the way
in fabulous colors, because nobody else does men's. Because generally those lit colors are generally only like reserved for women's sneakers.
Ray is familiar, but
like
Flash likes pastels on his kicks.
Hey, chill.
Specifically neon green.
Hey, neon's where it's at.
I feel you, but I'm talking about that's just his gig, right?
When I ran track, I either had white spikes, black spikes, or I had neon green spikes.
Hey, that neon green is where it's at. They had to see you. But I was like, yo, but companies like sneaker companies like Puma, Adidas, all these companies, the main companies, like the only like fancy colors they got is only for women. Those companies, the colors,
Now,
the color
I will tell
schemes,
you this.
Nike, Nike
Now,
got everything for
someone that
everybody.
will give Nike a run for the money in the color department is Asics, because my parents
Yes,
love Asics shoes,
yes.
and like with all the colors that they have, so they will
Asics
give
is
Nike
where it's at.
a run for for their money in the color department.
But Nike, I'll tell you what, I ain't even mad at Nike because the last pair of Nikes, the one out of the two pairs that I have, I think, I got it and I put it on and I was like, yo, this sneaker requires zero break-in time. It was just like, wearing like air. And I was like, man.
Now, but here's the thing, even though I'm Nike, I'm one of those people where I can't cross brand. So
Okay.
and so like if I wear, like I have an Adidas shirt on right now. So I have Adidas shorts on and I'll have Adidas socks on. Like I can't
I got
cross
you. I got
brand
you.
in my clothing and all that kind of stuff.
I was like, oh, we gotta knuckle up now.
So like it drives me crazy when I'm out and about and I see like someone wearing an Adidas shirt and they got on Nike joggers. I'm like, no, because here's why. Because all their colors aren't the same. Red with Nike is not red with Adidas, and
That's true.
very noticeable.
That's true. That's very true.
Now, when I went to college, my school was sponsored by Adidas, so that's the only reason why I have Adidas stuff. And then the NBA at one point was sponsored by Adidas, so that's why I had Adidas stuff. So I had to buy Adidas stuff. I don't know why I ended up with Under Armour stuff.
So I'm glad you actually brought up Adidas because the other day, Dame Lillard dropped 61 in his career high, and the reason I bring that up is because in celebration, Adidas went ahead and priced all the Dame Lillard $61, yeah, for a day. So I'm bringing this up because I was highly upset because by the time I found this out, it was about 5, 6 in the afternoon.
No
so
soup for you.
Yeah, exactly. All the colors I liked, there was like size 17 available.
And you know you gotta have inside sources for information like that.
Bruh, I need to start paying more attention to the shoe market because I really don't. I'm not like a big shoe guy like that. Like, I once in a while I go buy a pair when I just feel like it's time to get a new pair. I go get a new pair, but I'm not like one of those people that's like waiting on StockX or waiting on the sneakers app for something to drop and try to buy it as fast as possible. Like, I've never been one of those guys. But I bring this up to ask you: is there a sneaker that dropped that came out that you was like, I have to have this shoe, or it don't even got to be a shoe? If there's a product that dropped, period, that y'all were like, you gotta have this, and then just couldn't get it.
Are you saying right now or just ever?
In general,
just period, ever, just any product.
Like couldn't get it at all, or couldn't get it for like a time.
It's always gonna be for a time. Like if you gotta wait an extra month or 2 or 3, or you know what I mean, even a couple of days.
For me, it was so back in high school. It was
I know exactly what it was for me.
The Nike Freeze. Now recently, it's the Metcon for Nike. Those are always they're always limited because they're more like training shoes, gym shoes. So when they come out, they don't always, drop a high quantity of them. So if you don't get them right away, usually you have to wait about, I want to say maybe a month, maybe 2 tops. And sometimes that's also depending on the color. Now, the worst color of the bunch, you can always grab that color at any time. But obviously the best colors, they get sold out and you got to wait. But outside of that, I love Jordan, but I've never waited in line for Jordans. I've never waited online for Jordans or anything like that. So yeah, pretty much the Nike Freeze when I was in high school, and now the Metcons. That's it.
You know, it's crazy that you mentioned Jordans. That's not going to be my answer, but I've owned one pair of real mainline Jordans.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the only, not just because I owned it, but even looking through the historical, history, of the Jordans, It's been my favorite one, and that was the patent leather joints. I had the red and black ones.
You talking about the 11s?
I guess I don't even know the numbers, but the patent leather ones that came in the black and red, that came in the North Carolina blue. They had the black, they had the black and white ones. Like those are
That's my second favorite Jordan.
That I would buy those now, like as a sneaker. Like yes, let me get those. And
they drop them sneakers like every 2-3 years. Now. That's so popular.
I would. Yeah. That's a pair of Jordans. I'd be like, yes, I would get those. But that's obviously Jordans. That's not my answer. But my answer to that question that you pose is, I guess, kind of twice, and both times it was an Xbox. Literally the 360 and the Xbox One.
Oh, is this just a product in general?
He said product.
Oh, see, I thought I thought we were still talking about clothing. My bad.
He said sneakers, and he was like product.
But that was you had a good answer though.
You did have a good answer.
No, because that's not because in the terms of product, that's not clothing is nowhere in my top 5 when it comes to products in general. Like for me, it's my number 1 is definitely a camera. Like I've been like, especially with mirrorless being the new wave, I was waiting for the longest for Nikon to switch to mirrorless because I was like, do I buy this D850, which is the best DSLR camera in the world? You can't argue that whatsoever. Or do I wait and see what Nikon does with mirrorless? And then when Nikon came out with their mirrorless camera, the Z6 and Z7, I was like, do I stick with Nikon or do I move to Sony? So that it's always camera gear for me, always. Because if you don't get that right away, you will be waiting like 3-4 months before new supplies come out.
So when the Xbox One came out, I had no space. I just couldn't get it when it came out. And obviously I wasn't missing nothing because they foobarred the launch. But it wasn't until like months and months later. And the story behind this is that I had to wait to get it from a company that sells online, a lot of online stuff, old school retro. You could do trade-ins. I'll shout them out. Shout out to eStarland. I've been messing with them for years. They're way better than EB Games. They give you better credit. They reside up in Northern Virginia. Go check them out. But like, I had to wait because they're a company that they deal in a lot of used stuff. They're very particular about stuff that they take in. They don't take in garbage. It's not like EB Games, so you can bring any trash, or GameStop, I should say, bring in any trash in there and they'll just take it. Like, nah, they're a retro place that, they sell new stuff, but you know, they're very particular about, trade-ins that they take and whatever the case may be. Right. So again, they got retro, they got figures, they sell new software, old software, obviously used. But like new consoles, they don't get stock of new consoles. They only sell, the only consoles they get is like, when people bring them in or they get them refurbished, second, third party, whatever the case may be, right? Yeah. So I had all this credit with them. And I had to wait it had to be close to a year before I got an Xbox One after its launch. And I had credit sitting with them for so long to get it. And you know where I got that credit from? I got that credit because I had sold off my collection of Super Nintendo, Genesis, Dreamcast, N64, the consoles, games. I had to
sell all that just to get an Xbox One?
It was actually partially. It was to get an Xbox One and eventually to get a Wii U. It was kind of like the family's first. All of us as a family was the first like console for everybody, and it was kind of like Grayson's like introduction into games was the Wii U, right? So like all of that credit went to all of that stuff.
In the Wii U.
Hey, look. The Wii U was trash, like from a software perspective and what they tried to do. But again, as I've said plenty of times before, the Wii U was a test system for the Switch, and it did what it had to do. And the Switch has been an absolute success because of that test run for the Wii U. Switch is amazing. It'll go down as one of the greatest consoles ever because it is 100% perfect for what it does. But I traded in I had so many games, bro, that I traded in that had rarity. I had Turtles in Time for Super Nintendo. I had the Ninja Gaiden trilogy, which is kind of a rare-ish title. I had a bunch of stuff. I had a bunch of stuff that I got super good value for. I traded an NES that was the top loader NES, which was kind of rare as well. Because that one didn't suffer from the pin problem of the NES, the original NES. Bro, I traded all that shit to get eventually an Xbox One and a Wii U. But yeah, before that was Xbox 360, which I didn't have to wait as long because I was working at Best Buy at the time when 360 came out. So like I was working at the stores for the launch, and like I was like, oh, I got to get a console. So people that I worked with, like they had a couple days, they were camped out outside our store waiting to get one. I couldn't get one. I was maybe like a couple weeks later that I got one because the girl that I was dating at the time, she was like, yo, I'll go stand in line for you at one of the other stores that's getting a shipment. I was like, word? Because I was working like in the morning or overnight or something. And she was like, yeah, I'll do that. I was like, all right, cool. Like, it's a bet. And I met her there while she was sitting there waiting in line. Cool. Got my console. Like, word? Yo, got my 360, went home with that joint, took home, them trash ass games at the time. And because launch titles is always trash, which is why I was so surprised which is why I'm not mad that Halo Infinite got delayed, because I'm like, yo, I need that to be fire. I need it to be what it is. I need that to be, Halo has gotten so much flack for the delay, but I'm like, yo, everybody else does this. Like Sony delays their games. Nintendo is like synonymous with delaying their first party games because they're like, yo, Zelda's not ready. Come back next year. Like, oh, damn, okay. Like, because they know that like, yo, we need more time because when we're done, we're going to give you a 10. All right, bet. Like, and nobody really bats an eye. People are disappointed. Like, oh, man, I want a Zelda this year, but whatever. Because they know that when Nintendo's like, yo, we need an extra 8 months. People are like, yeah, but I know when they're done, it's going to be a masterpiece. Because that's what they expect. So I'm like, I'm not mad that 343 needs extra time because it's like obviously pandemic and whatever else. Obviously, the game may have not been ready. There may be aspects of the game that they couldn't get ready for launch this year. Fine, take your time, do what you gotta do, because guess we'll probably get it early-ish next year, and that'll just give us something to play in the early part of next year, spring maybe, whatever, early spring, whatever. Just give me when it's ready. If you tell me it would have been a 7 now or a 9.5 later, give me the 9.5 later because we need Halo to hit. And I think that it'll be better for Microsoft in the long run because right now they can push service. They can push what they want to push now, which is Game Pass, xCloud. They can push the narrative of, come get into the ecosystem. And then when Halo Infinite drops and it's what they want it to be, they can move consoles to fit their quota, because moving consoles isn't part of their, game plan for next generation. But whatever consoles that Halo Infinite helps move because they pushed it back and maybe push it back and it'll be a masterpiece game. Hey, all the more power to them, because that's not what they're here for anymore. Microsoft has come full circle as a company in the gaming landscape, because as we've mentioned before and just earlier here on this podcast, Microsoft was software, right? Microsoft is quintessential being a software company. Even being in the PC landscape, they still weren't a hardware company. Other, companies made and built PCs. Microsoft, there were no Microsoft PCs. Like it wasn't just recently till you were getting like Surface laptops / tablet things, right? So, but Microsoft wasn't a hardware company. Microsoft has always been a software company, right?
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't until Xbox that it was like, yo, this was their hardware, like, kind of experiment, and it was a success. And to get to that point, and now they've come full circle where they're like, And it makes me ask the question in my head where how long has been Microsoft playing this long game where they were like, yo, how long is it going to take for us to get back to making this a software thing, right? I don't know how long they've been playing that game, but this is the culmination of however long they've been playing that game.
I would
however long
say
they've been developing that.
I would say that probably started when the Xbox One launched.
Probably, right? Because they
With the-
wanted to do it
like
there.
with the,
where they
the
were,
whole all-in-one system. I bet you that's what the whole point of that was supposed to be,
and
but it didn't quite go the way they
No.
wanted to, so they had to push it back.
And also before that system came out, you'll also remember that they were the ones that really had thrown the idea out there where they were like, hey, the Xbox is going to be digital. And everybody went all up in arms and they were like, okay, we'll give you your physical games. All right. But now, again, like you said, you're right. We've seen that culmination from that. They took that whole Xbox One generation. And I feel like that's probably a reason also why the Xbox One suffered, because they were busy working on this, which I'm fine with. They took that whole Xbox One generation and were like, okay, just let that be, because we're working towards this. We're working towards separating ourselves from what Sony does, because we're not going to occupy the same space anymore. So we're going to be about software, cloud, streaming gaming. This is what we're going to be about, and get on board with this, because this is what we do. We're a software company. We're Microsoft. We're the best at this. This is what we do. We've been doing this for 30 years. Like, get on board with this because we know this. How long have Microsoft been doing this? Before the Xbox, right? So it's like, this is their thing. This is why xCloud, even in alpha status and beta status, works so well, because this is what Microsoft does. Like, and fully expect when xCloud goes live into Game Pass on September 15th that it will work well, because it works well now in preview.
It works very well now. If anybody out there is playing it, drop something in the comments about your experience. But my experience has been excellent.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't like, and it's probably just title related as opposed to, Project xCloud related, is I tried to play World War Z and connecting is a little trash, but it's likely because there's a lot of people not playing that game anymore ever since.
Yeah, probably.
Like, a lot of people are not on those servers anymore. So that's title related. But just to say, to nitpick something about a title is the only complaint I have about it. But other than that, it's been excellent.
Absolutely. And again, it's been excellent, and xCloud is going to be excellent once it goes live into Game Pass. And
I was playing Tekken online.
Bro, on my phone. I did that too, just to test it. Like, yo, this runs well on my phone. Just playing with my Bluetooth Xbox controller.
I forgot to close my other apps while I was playing it. So I'm like, wow.
No.
I had a bunch of other apps running at the same time, and it was running smooth.
xCloud is fantastic, right? And this is we have now come into this next generation where this is probably the most diverse generation of games we're going to be going into probably ever, because everybody has their own very specific lane to function, cohesively. Sony does their thing, Microsoft does their thing, Nintendo does their thing.
Yeah, and also what Microsoft has added into, because they're seeing how great their bond is about to be with Google, is that they've added the Microsoft Companion to be able to do things on your computer and your phone together, very similar to what Apple's done with Mac OS X and and the iPhone, where you can send text messages over your computer now, and you can do video chatting, and you can make your phone calls, and you're able to do that. And then in addition, I'm also, because I'm a Google Fi customer, I'm able to do the same thing through my Gmail in regards to calls and text messages. I can send all that if I'm sitting on the PC and maybe the phone's charging.
Shout out to Microsoft, Joe.
Yeah, it's cool. Integration is excellent. Anyhow, you can integrate something into something else, even if they're not related. It's excellent to integrate shit with each other. Because at the end of the day, people dream of that moment where you feel like you're in the future and your voice commanding everything in your house, and everything just works together in sync. And it's excellent. If all the techies out there, that's the killer right there. That's what we're all waiting for. Is when totally everything, and we're getting there as far as doing the smart home thing between the Nest and the Ring doorbells and the Google Home and
the lights and all that
Alexa
shit.
and all of that and all the cool shit that we're able to do now. Like we're getting to that point now of, hey, we're able to do so much between the TVs. I can speak to my Google Assistant, and I can control Roku TV in the living room, or I control the Roku device that my youngest has in his room. And that's cool shit, and that's what we're waiting for. So for Apple to kind of block out that process because they're making money off of it.
Bullshit. And and as I mentioned before, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, they still steady trying to push that Apple Arcade, and that's the real reason. Let's not get a twist. That's the real reason why these gaming companies are getting blocked from using these services. Because again, don't tell me it's about regulating content and shit when Netflix operates on your platform. So don't give me that bullshit. It's about trying to push that Apple Arcade bullshit that nobody wants.
You know what? For a while, Netflix didn't operate through them. There was no Netflix app for a very long time.
Right, and then they realized, we probably losing too much money by not having.
That's why I'm not worried about this, because that's what's gonna happen. Money talks.
I don't know, bro.
All
money does talk, yes, but
them in the pants, and then they'll just add it eventually.
Right now, all it's gonna be, obviously, it's not gonna be there at launch, but all it's gonna be is who caves first. Does Apple cave first, or does Microsoft cave first?
I don't think Microsoft is gonna cave on this, because Microsoft was just like, because it was just Microsoft, the information came out. Microsoft was like, all right, well, let's just go ahead and end the Apple part of the beta early, because we don't need that.
I think the success of the Series X is going to really be the deciding factor for this. Like if they have a good launch, especially because they're dropping right before Christmas, and Apple likes to drop a new device right around that same time, November-ish, because everybody's trying to collect that Christmas money. I think that launch is going to be a big decider of when Apple decides I'm going to go ahead and take the jump.
I think the subscription numbers will speak more to that, because that's more about what this is. The Game Pass subscription numbers and how many people are steadily using the xCloud within Game Pass. I think that is what's going to speak more to what, kind of where a decision will be made on this. Because, again, it's not so much about how Series X does specifically, because Microsoft effectively doesn't really care about how it does, because
the console itself, it doesn't matter, because they've already said that
that's not what they're pushing.
The games, if we buy them on the Xbox One, we'll have them on the Series X. So there's no need to jump right away if you don't want to, or
use your old controller.
Your controller will work. Sorry for all you so many people. Game Pass is universal, so it's there for the One. It's gonna be there for the Series X, or Series S. So the thing about it is, they're not necessarily pushing the console. Like, yes, performance-wise, yes, it is a higher performing console than the Xbox One.
It's still going to be the most powerful console in the market.
But as of right now, there's not going to be a plethora of games that are going to be utilizing that power to the point where you can't play those same games on your Xbox One.
No.
So
because
save your money.
It's
basically what Microsoft is saying. Save your money and subscribe to Game Pass. And then once you love Game Pass and then your Xbox One becomes obsolete, hey, here's the Series X right here. Now, if you want to buy the Series X right away, which I'm planning on doing, then boom, you're fine. You're good. You can do that. Everything is still going to work right away. You'll have access to these titles, with this power. Boom.
My biggest thing because Microsoft has been big on this, moving into this next generation, it's not about consoles. It's about services, right? They would sell me on the Series X as an Xbox One X owner with the, with those very intricate details of the system, right? The things that I want from a next generation console. And this, again, it's not about pushing the boundaries of graphics, because we've done that already. We've passed that part already. The game's only going to look so much. We've hit a point, and we've talked about this on the Flash and Dash podcast. Go check that out. But we've mentioned that before, where graphics have kind of hit their ceiling. So it's about what can these consoles do, and this is more about what Microsoft is talking about more so than Sony, where what can these consoles do in terms of that next generation. For Microsoft, the next generation in consoles is no load times, right? Cutting out load times, cutting out, those things where fast switching between applications where it's seamless. You can switch between games. You can have multiple games open, whatever the case may be, all of that stuff. I feel like the new Series X controllers have a share button, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the next generation of what consoles are for these companies. Well, for Microsoft, at least. I don't know about Sony, but go ahead, C.
Here's the killer for me. So I want to buy an Xbox Series X on launch, but I have to question how much I'm going to use it initially, especially with smart delivery. I'm basically just going to be playing a lot of the same games, but with clearly, obviously better graphics. We've had the graphics conversation already. So
so that's the thing. So for me, I have an iPhone and I have a Mac. Now, I'm not going to be able to use xCloud on those systems right now. Now I don't necessarily have to get, like, I can keep my Xbox One and still use the same titles and same service. But it's just what I do. Like, I just always upgrade. Now the other thing is, even if someone does have, an Android device or anything like that, and they can use it, the problem is some people just don't want to play those games on a smaller screen. Some people just want to utilize their TV.
But that stuff is really not for doing, like, when you're in the house, right? Unless somebody's using the TV.
Right.
That's like on the go.
But what it is, it's all a preference. So that's what it is. It's going to be each person's individual preference, which will determine, do I get the console right away? Do I wait to get the console? Do I never get the console because I've got Game Pass? I'm always traveling, so all I need is a phone or a tablet, whatever, and I'm good to go. So whatever that person's, specific preference is. And then, like, for me, we've all seen the Series X. Most likely that will not be a travel console. So if I go somewhere and I travel, I've got my Xbox One. So I can take that with me. True. It's light enough. It's only need 2 cables. I can plug it in wherever.
See, for the rest of us, though, in the Android world, we don't got to take any console on the go because we got that in our phone or tablet.
You know what? It's really different for me because I play in a year-round Madden league. So, we kick off. We're not having a Madden conversation. Let's just get that out. But what we typically do is we wait till, like, the first roster update drops, and then we start playing. So typically it's about 2-3 weeks, maybe a month into the game, we start playing, and then we play like we're still playing
by then.
And we're playing until the launch of the new title. So, for that, I don't want to get a month or two into a league, and then now we got to decide, okay, is everybody changing over to the Series X, or are we just going to play out on Xbox One? Right, but I don't know if the league is going to transfer over to the new title.
It should. I don't think that will interrupt that, because it'll be like a person-to-person basis on what version of the game they have.
Is now, are we playing cross-platform? Is that what we're crossing into now? Because
I think with smart delivery,
you don't get one, but we play in the same league. Like, how does that work?
I think with smart delivery, it won't matter system to system, as long as and that's the beauty of smart delivery and how it's going to work with Xbox. Is that it's not going to matter whether you're playing on same thing like how Halo was going to be. It doesn't matter if you're playing on a 1X or you're playing on a Series X or whatever Lockhart's going to be, probably Series S. There's no reason not to believe that at this point.
Like Series S.
So I don't think it's going to matter, just as long as you have that game is capable of that smart delivery, right? Which Madden 21 will be. It's not going to matter what console you have, just as long as you have the game. The only thing that's going to be different is, obviously, if you have the newer console, It'll graphically be better. It'll run a little bit fast, load a little bit faster, whatever the case may be. But again, everybody will be able to integrate collectively again, which is what Microsoft MO is. It still revolves around ecosystem. Microsoft just want, and I don't think it'll matter whether or not, like, let's say it's the Game Pass game, you've got Halo Infinite. It's not going to matter whether everybody's going to integrate together. So you're playing on a 1X or Series S or Series X or your phone or your tablet. Everybody's just going to be able to integrate together.
Or your Apple device.
Nah, that's it's 8 months later.
8 months later.
Cue SpongeBob GIF. But like, it's not gonna matter, and that's the beauty of what Microsoft is trying to do. Microsoft, like, yo, just hit us, just come up off that $15 a month.
I have the gut feeling that Apple's gonna put out some ad like, "Hey, we're doing this," like it's the new hot shit when they start doing it. It's gonna be this big deal, like, "Oh, look, yeah, we're doing this now. You can play on your phone. You can play Xbox."
Absolutely.
All right, so here's what I'm gonna say about that.
100%.
Here's the problem.
Bet money on that now. Book it.
Here's the problem that you all are running into. Everyone's not techie like us, and everyone doesn't follow this news like us. So everyone's not gonna know that it's been out for Android devices. Android. So and it's because Android, they don't do, their marketing is nowhere near Apple's marketing.
No, because they spend money on things that are more important.
But I understand that, but marketing is what moves product.
You don't gotta advertise like that.
Right, but that's how Apple gets more people, because their marketing is so good. So when Apple does market it, everyone that had no clue about it or didn't know, boom, they're going out there buying it. Parents are going to be buying their kids iPads and stuff for whatever that next holiday would
not
be.
If little Timmy can't play Fortnite on his iPad,
but
he can't on his Android one.
By then he'll be playing Rogue Company, he'll be playing whatever. But the thing is that marketing is what's going to get them to move that product. So it's not going to necessarily hurt them, but like to make that commercial, that's what it's all going to be for. It's for all those people that aren't following the news and have no clue whatsoever is going on. We know, but they don't know.
So I got the greatest hypothetical question for gaming. If Microsoft, because this has been whatever in the past in terms of Microsoft and other companies kind of working together, but if Microsoft and Nintendo became a single entity, would that be enough?
All right, so this is
to
definitely
kill off Sony?
This is definitely a fanboy question.
Whoa, no, sir. This is a hypothetical question that if these two companies decided, if Microsoft and Nintendo decided to integrate, merge, whatever terminology it is that you want to use, would that be enough to kill off Sony? Now, and I say that to the sense that now you're talking about those two companies integrating, which means that both companies have access to each other's properties. Both companies have access to each other's services, which means that Nintendo stuff could function under Xbox Live. Xbox now has access to Mario library, whatever the case, it could run on Xbox Live.
Everything cross-platform.
Everything.
But you got to remember,
everything's integrated.
even that would be great. But you have to remember that Sony's core followers, all they care about are exclusives. That's the only argument they ever had. We got this exclusive.
But now, true.
But no, but hang on. So, but unless you're taking Sony's exclusives from them, they're going to continue buying that system. Sony can come out with, Last of Us 75. And people are still going to buy it. People are still going to say it's the best thing out there.
But when you combine the two properties of those communities and they're now getting exclusives and all that stuff, when you're talking like you're getting Halo and Mario and Mario Party, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, Forza, Luigi, all together. Could you imagine? And this goes back to the stuff that's been rumored in the past, with something like Xbox Live functioning on a Switch.
So in this scenario, like, does one company buy the other, or they merge and continue to coexist?
They
I'm pretty sure it's more of a
merge and it just integrated everything. Where
but probably like
everything
hardware
works
wise, so like there will still
together.
be like Microsoft hardware, there will still be Nintendo hardware, but
But they all have access.
But software wise and internet
Some
wise,
sort of
they're
like cloud
sharing.
gaming.
They're all on this. They're all in the same servers, pretty much.
All in the same servers, all in the same ecosystem. Where now Nintendo has access to Xbox Live. Xbox has got access to all Nintendo IPs and vice versa.
Enough at the top with Sony because
And
Sony
Xbox Live could function on Switch. Could you imagine Xbox Live functioning on Switch?
But see, Microsoft doesn't need to do that with xCloud coming out. They don't necessarily need that.
They don't. But
Sony has
could you imagine a device as good as the Switch running Xbox Live? That's what Microsoft really needs.
So I'll say this. So Sony has a very they have a cult following. It's a very unique niche market that they have.
They do. It's really resolved around first player single player adventure games. It's like 4 properties. It's 4 properties is what we're talking about. Let's be honest. Like
what happens with a lot of these guys is a lot of these guys that are playing this console believe that they are at the pinnacle of gaming. And you cannot change that mindset.
Correct. That's what I was saying.
It's very similar to someone that like not like all iPhone users, but like the person that doesn't know a lot, like you said, Dre, earlier, like the person that's not techie and they have an iPhone and they value things like the different color text messages and
here's what
and the emotes, the faces that you can make the little cartoon faces. I forget what they called.
The memojis.
So those, but like they value certain things that are unique to what they have. So and in that.
But then the main thing with what you're saying is they just don't want to change. Like they don't want to go to something else because they don't want to prove that what they were using was wrong or is obsolete.
Right.
That's the thing.
And that's a good point because I go back to that a lot where I tell people all the time, a strictly Sony gamer like is one of the most close-minded individuals you will ever meet because if you compare them to other like as a primary like as a only home as like maybe like a only Xbox person, they're open to other things, right? An Xbox gamer is like, I might check out a PlayStation or I might get a Switch or I might get this.
Ed bought a PlayStation just so he could get MLB The Show.
Right. And only PlayStation gamers like, man, fuck I'm not getting an Xbox never. Like I'm a Switch for babies. Like there's Sony gamers are the most close-minded gamers that we have that exist, period. Because Xbox gamers are open to trying other things. They're like, yeah, I've had a PlayStation. Like, yeah. I mean, they got good games. Xbox gamers will always admit that Sony's got good games, but they're just like, I'm done with that because I've evolved from what Sony does, and I like other things. Same thing with like Nintendo, players. They're like, oh well, Nintendo's whatever, but I'm open to like maybe trying another console. Like I'll get a second console or a third console, whatever. Sony gamers, they're not checking for nothing else. You can't tell them nothing. God of War, Last of Us.
All they're checking for is the next Sony console. That's it.
Those 4 games are the best 4 games that ever existed ever in the history of games. God of War, Last of Us, Spider-Man, and like what's the other one that I'm missing? There's always a 4th one that you always can't remember.
Oh,
Uncharted, and they don't even do Uncharted anymore.
I'll say this as well for the Sony gamers, like. We dogging the console and not the console, but we dogging
which is not exclusive anymore.
The mentality about it and the reason we do that. And I don't know about these other 2 fellas, but in my personal opinion, I dog out Sony specifically because, like Flash said, it's the closed-mindedness that's the issue.
Yeah, I don't, and I never,
you think you got something, but you don't. At the end of the day,
that's just me. That's just me in general. Like I don't like being closed-minded. Like, granted, I like Apple, but I've had an Android.
Yeah.
Like I can talk about both because I've had both.
That's
always been my point as well.
And it sucks when people only had one or the other, and
always want to speak on both.
Right. Now, it's one thing. If you've only had one, you speak highly of that one. Okay, you can do that because you've only had that one. But you can't say anything about the other. If you've never
Exactly.
had it, touched it,
Never had it.
And that's what
whatever.
kills me, which is why I always take the stances that I take, because I've had an iPhone. I've always had every generation PlayStation that's been out. I've owned I've had a PS1 through PS4 at some point in time. So I can speak on that. I've had I've had every Nintendo console ever. So it's like I've had different phones of Android. I've had, HTC Androids. I've had Samsung Androids. I've
Not
had
get an
different
HTC.
You know what I'm saying? Not now. No, they got a ways to go to get back in the game. But like,
that's the reason I switched to iPhone.
Yeah. I've had different versions. Like, I've had Motorola. I've had different versions of things. But like, Sony people are so like, they've had a PlayStation. They've always had a PlayStation. They ain't had nothing else, but everything else is trash. Like, yo, how do you know that? You don't know that for a fact. They were like, oh, the Xbox controller is too big. Well, I'm sorry, your hands are tiny. You can't, like, you've never evolved up to man status to get a bigger controller. Like, I'm sorry that you haven't, because even for people that aren't Xbox people, they will admit that the Xbox 360 controller is probably the greatest controller ever created.
A lot of guys that play both consoles,
period.
A lot of guys that play both consoles will tell you, like, oh, all the stuff that is available on all platforms, I just play on my other console, but I play the exclusives on Sony.
Sure, and that's fine, and I don't have a problem with that. And
what
that's cool.
But there's nothing wrong with getting a console for its exclusives, because obviously it's exclusive to that console.
There isn't. And I always get into these tiffs about the different companies, because people always like, well, Microsoft has no exclusives. And I'm like, okay, but Sony has 3 or 4. Like, it's the same property argument. Microsoft has the same number. I'm not going to tell you Microsoft has dozens of exclusives outside of indie games, of course. But I'm like, okay, yes, okay. Sony has, again, God of War, Gran Turismo, Last of Us, Spider-Man, and Uncharted is dead for all intents and purposes.
And Forza killed Gran Turismo.
Forza's killed Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo can't even get out the gate anymore because Forza Motorsport and Forza Horizon. So, but Microsoft has Forza. 2 properties of Forza, by the way, because they're 2 very different games. Let's not forget that. Microsoft has Halo. Microsoft has Gears of War. So it's like, yeah, that's a thing. But both companies has, a handful of games. And I guess, of course, if you start mentioning other stuff, like Sony has, Ratchet and Clank, which they finally brought back from the dead. Like, I was like, okay, great. But Microsoft has, if you want to talk about individual family properties, Microsoft has some of them laying around as well. Like, Ori was exclusive until just recently, when I think it came to Switch. I think the original Ori came to Switch or something like that. But, I just like, it's funny that Nintendo was the other company that the other 2 companies kind of play nice with, low key on the back end. Like, oh yeah, just port it to Switch, and Nintendo's like, got another one. Like, Nintendo, everybody just forgets, like, oh yeah, that is
Nintendo's
on Switch.
The middle child.
Like, yo, Nintendo, and
even though it's the oldest, it's the middle child.
They're killing, and people just like, they exist in their own path, and they're just killing, because they're good at what they do. Well, they're great. Nintendo's great at what they do.
Was that a J. Cole plug?
Maybe.
I'm like, wait a second.
But I think the ultimate to that is that, again, I much like C said, I'm not a fan of that closed-minded mentality of, I've only had this and everything else is trash. All right, well, you have no footing to say that everything else is trash because they're like, oh, I held the Xbox controller, it was too big. All right, well, let's understand that we've evolved from every time I hold a Sony controller, and I'm like, how do y'all play games with the thumbsticks here where they are? Like, I just don't understand. Like,
but what's going to be their new argument? No, what's going to be their new argument? Because the new PS5 controllers are bigger. So
they are bigger.
What's going to be their argument now?
It's not.
Bigger controllers are better. That's what it's going to turn into.
They're going to sell you on bug snacks.
That's a good note right there.
Bug Snacks. That's what they're gonna tell you. Bug Snacks is the best console exclusive ever.
Bug Snacks and Sackboy.
Sackboy. Check out the new Sackboy. I forgot that was a property they had too. Nobody cares about that stuff.
Hey,
They always talk
wrap,
about that stuff.
Let's wrap
like
this
anybody
up.
cares about it.
We in here for a few hours.
Cares? I've lost count. Damn Sony, Apple.
Because
well,
we continue to talk about Sony, we're gonna be that's a rabbit hole right
we'll
there.
be here forever. And again, if you're a Sony gamer that has other consoles, we're not talking about you. We're here for the exclusive. I've had a PlayStation 1 and I've owned nothing else. And I don't know any better. We're here. We're talking about you. And you can come in the comments. You don't care. I will fight you in the comments. We can go back and forth because you're still going to be wrong. Because
we fight with those same people in the Facebook group.
In fact, come to the Facebook group. And with that said, we are going to end this week's episode of the Sports Gaming Anonymous podcast. What episode was this? 10 again? I've lost count. We are rolling. There's no stopping us now. What was the name of that WWE theme where they had that? Anyway, so thank you guys for joining us. We very much appreciate the support and all the likes and the views and the interactions on the Facebook page. And speaking of which, Dre, where can they find us on social media?
All right, so now got a little difference for you all if you've actually watched the first 9 episodes. Now you can actually go to the main page of our YouTube page and click on the Twitter or the Instagram link, and that'll take you straight to our Twitter and Instagram pages. Yes, I stopped procrastinating. I finally got that done. So boom, you can do that. But if you don't do that because you're on your phone or you're somewhere else and you just don't want to do that, follow us on Twitter at Sports Games Anon. Follow us on Instagram at Sports Gaming Anonymous. Join the Facebook group, Sports Gaming Anonymous. You should be watching this on YouTube, but if you're not, follow us on YouTube or subscribe to us on YouTube at Sports Gaming Anonymous. Make sure to hit the bell so you know whenever we upload a video. We upload all different kinds of videos. We'll be streaming on YouTube here soon. We all stream on our own individual Twitch channels. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Appreciate you. Go down in the comments, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe. Make sure you check out, the timestamps. We got different timestamps for you, so check that out. And again, we appreciate y'all. We're here for y'all. As long as y'all keep watching and hitting these views, we're gonna keep bringing this content. Even if you don't, we're gonna keep bringing the content anyway, because we are thoroughly enveloped here. We enjoying this. We loving this.
Prefer if you watch.
We do prefer if you watch. I mean, but we're going to keep banging this out. We're going to keep banging out this content.
Because you're going to watch eventually.
You are going to watch eventually because we are out here. Sports Gaming Anonymous. We appreciate you. Check out the Sports Gaming Anonymous. Check out the Old School Gamers podcast. Check out the Flash and Dash podcast. We are all over the place. We're out here. Thank you, C1. Thank you, Dre. We appreciate you. I've been Flash. Peace out, y'all.
All right.